Hey, we're going to look at the March 12th entry for the Daily Stoic.
Let's do it.
Seeing things as the person at fault does. Seeing things as the person at fault does.
Some old English.
Okay, taking the perspective of the person who effed up. That's my first guess. Okay. It starts with a quote by our favorite Marcus Aurelius. Whenever someone has done wrong by you, immediately consider what notion of good or evil they had in doing it. For when you see that, you'll feel compassion instead of astonishment or rage. For you may yourself have the same notions of good and evil, or similar ones, in which case you'll make an allowance for what they've done. But if you no longer hold the same notions, you'll be more readily gracious for their error.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, maybe I'm totally off on this one, but try to find, like when someone wrongs me, I need to try to find the asking a question of like, hey, what drove them to this, or what were they trying to do or trying to get, right? Like almost like being compassionate about the reason why someone acted like that. And if you are more interested in that automatically gets you out of your rage about why they did it to you or something. Like, why me? Like, this person has done this and that, right? They did this to me. They did this to me. It's like, again, it's like the first initial reaction. But then you can say, oh, I wonder what drove them to do that thing. And now you're kind of shifting to more of like interest into finding out how we work, or like how people work, instead of kind of like on this like raging response or something.
Mm-hmm. What it's bringing up for me is the idea of intention versus impact, which is a conversation that we've been having a lot lately.
Yeah.
Because the tendency is to judge people based on the impact that they have in your life. And that's where the rage comes from, because you're saying, F you for cutting me off. But then if you look at the intention behind it, they maybe didn't even see you, and this is like the nicest guy in the world getting home for dinner with his kids. Right. And if you met him at the grocery store or on the golf course, you would be like totally into this guy. So how much peaceful would your life be if you had that view? Because most people out there actually hold similar values to you. Their values would be consistent with yours. And so, it's a mistake, or it's like, a well-intentioned blunder that happens, and it's okay, versus it being just constantly rageful and like the world is out to get me.
Right. Yeah, that made me think of the like how everyone has a reason why they're acting the way they're acting. So if somebody's cutting me off on the highway, like, again, the initial thing is like, oh, you asshole, or something, right? But then if you think about it, like, okay, well, like, have I ever cut off anyone because like
you're like, F this person?
Yeah, no, you just like, you're in a hurry,
you're like, whoops,
or your mind is somewhere else.
I didn't see you. Like, most of the time, you didn't even see them.
You might be in the kind kind of like a part of your life that is like you're busy at work or something, or you're thinking about something and you constantly rushing and not even realizing that you're doing this, right? So like, okay, maybe the honk of somebody else will make you like realize like, hey, snap out of it, you're not doing this according to the rest of the flow, right, or something like that. But yeah, but ultimately everyone has that reason of why they're doing it, and they're not doing it to you. They're doing it, and you happen to kind of be there or something. You know, it's more like that versus like somebody specifically doing it to you, and then you didn't. But we all take it as like, oh, this has been done to me. Yeah, so that's I like it to like applying it in the way that like when these things happen, you know, try to see it as that they're not happening to me, but they're just happening, and I happen to be there to witness them or something. Yeah.
Here's what Ryan Holiday has to say. Socrates, perhaps the wisest person to ever live, used to say that nobody does wrong willingly.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that no one is wrong on purpose either. Nobody thinks they're wrong, even when they are. They think they're right, they're just mistaken. Otherwise, they wouldn't think it anymore. Could it be that the slights you've experienced or the harm that others have done to you was not inflicted intentionally? What if they simply thought they were doing the right thing? For them, even for you. It's like the memorial for Confederate soldiers at Arlington, obviously a cause that was wrongly fought for by people doing wrong, which states in part that the Confederate soldiers served in simple obedience to duty as they understood it. Again, they understood wrongly, but it was their genuine understanding, just as Lincoln was genuine when he ended his famous Cooper Union speech by saying, "Let us, to the end, dare to do our duty as we understand it." How much more tolerant and understanding would you be today if you could see the actions of other people as attempts to do the right thing? Whether you agree or not, how radically would this lens change your perspective on otherwise offensive or belligerent actions?
Yeah, like trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes or something. That's also like a summary of something like that.
In some ways, you know, the example we brought up of the person on the freeway cutting you off, that's like such a simple example because there's no personal relationship there. They're most likely doing something on accident, so they're not intending to do you any harm. But I think the areas where we have the most trouble with this is in the areas where there's like more entanglement in our lives. And so, you know, like me and you, for example, there's sometimes I would get mad at you when really, like, and I have done this sometimes, like more recently, where it's like I'll get mad at you and then I'll be like, okay, but like what information does he have, and like what information is he working with and basing his decisions on and like showing up to this world in, and like what's driving his behavior essentially. And then I'll often realize like, oh yeah, I would probably do the same thing as him if that's the information that I was working with.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm getting upset is like, because, well, I have all this other information,
Sure.
and I think you have it also.
Mm-hmm.
I must be thinking that, like, oh, he has this information, and he's like doing this on purpose. I mean, that's not a conscious thought,
Sure.
but like you have to kind of think that in order to get mad at somebody.
Yeah,
you have to be like, hey,
they know
what they're
but they're
doing.
not doing it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And so
versus no, they kind of legitimately don't know. Or they know something, but they don't know maybe everything. And if they knew everything, maybe their view would have been totally different, and they would be doing it differently, right? The way actually how it would align with how you might want those things to be done.
yeah, it would be compatible with what
Mm-hmm.
whatever want was being broken by your behavior of like, why is he acting like this?
Yeah.
So I think that's like an interesting thing that you can maybe, the way I can start thinking about applying this is to reverse engineer this one backwards from moments of rage. There has to be the recognition that I'm feeling rageful, because that recognition always happens after the rage starts. So there's like a period of time where the rage exists without being noticed. But if I can get a moment in to notice it, then I can remind myself of the intention, like look at the intention behind what's happening. And that includes not just like, well, intention to me is like, well, what does the other person want? But it's also like, well, what information is the other person working with?
Sure.
As a baseline of reality.
Yeah. And then when you ask the question of, hey, the impact was this, right? And that's what really matters. And then you're not really
and I'm feeling rageful about the impact.
You know, we're not interested in the attention. Sorry, the intention.
Mm-hmm.
But if we then start being more interested in what was the intention, now we might see like, intention may have been good, and then we also notice this person doesn't have all the data they need in order to make the decision that the impact would have been
better for
everyone, maybe, perhaps. Yeah. And it's easy to get rage or mad or pissed off at somebody because they don't have the information.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, how do you not have that? Like, come on.
Well,
right? Like
because to the person who thinks, well, why don't you have it? They might even think, I told you this dozens of times. How would you not know this? And so there's also maybe this disbelief that the other person. So there is sort of like this kind of like, screw you. You did have more information.
You had more information.
And
you knew how to do it.
And you did the bad thing anyway because you're an asshole.
Yeah.
And so like, this is the diagnosis that is so often the case. And I think it's important to realize that first assumption of like, I know what information you have in your brain is fundamentally not true.
You are already on the wrong path there. And then so therefore any thoughts after that or any investigation or analysis after that, you are already going the wrong direction because you started with this, I know that what you know and I know what you don't know, right? But we don't know what the other people know or don't know. That's why there are question marks. Or there are questions, right? Like you have to ask questions to clarify. Hey, say in other words, how do you know this understanding, right? And it's like that takes a long time to clarify everything. It's just like, oh my God, we're gonna be here for hours. But maybe we can get quicker at it and just kind of like, hey, do you get me on this? Oh yeah, I'll do it by 2:00. You said 2, right? Okay, 2:00, cool. Now it's like, oh, we definitely had this understanding. There was definitely this confirmation.
Yeah, I think we need to work on
Yeah.
confirmation of understanding between us,
Confirmation of
because
understanding,
there's
for sure.
sometimes that I think that we have confirmed something,
Mhm.
and then later on it'll be like your point of view on it will be like, well, I remember talking somewhat about that general topic.
Mhm.
It feels like this very sort of like
But,
high level
but
thing.
let's say decision has not been made,
But it is-
in my opinion.
Right. And
Right,
so,
right.
but I left that conversation, and this has happened multiple times
Sure,
where I've left the conversation being like, okay, that's settled, moving on, because like my brain is like trying to take the checkbox off so that I can move on to the next item, and I can throw the first item away and say, okay, cool, I don't need to pay attention to this anymore. My attention is free for the next line item. And so that's where sometimes my assumption happens that like you have the same information as I do, or even that we've reached a particular decision. So that is interesting, that we could definitely work on confirming our decisions with each other, so that doesn't end up being an assumption I'm making later on that leads into trouble.
Yeah. And the first thought is like, oh, that's so much work and so much so many checkpoints, so many times I have to, yeah, but it's better because ultimately at the end of the day, you'll end up with better results, so it's worth it or something, you know? Like it seems like it's like, oh, there's so much administrative work about checking all these decisions or all these conversations, make sure that they are concluded on all ends, right? Like it seems like, oh, that's like a lot of work or something, but like we haven't been doing that, but I already know that whenever something feels like a lot of work, there's probably a good reward somewhere in there at the end.
Well, what do you think the work looks like?
That's what's so hard to kind of see, because like, well, something got me thinking about prioritization. Like, well, you don't have to do it with every single thing you're talking about. Like, hey, we're gonna have soup. You know, like, are we heating up the soup now? We don't have to keep checking and triple checking on silly things like that, right? But maybe something important, let's say, like, hey, we shifted from the idea of going on this vacation, we are not going to do that, so let's confirm, hey, we're not doing it. Oh, yeah, are you okay with it? Yes. So like prioritization of what tasks are important, but it's hard to imagine how to just do it on the fly and know which tasks are high on priority to make sure that they are all understood from all ends, versus ones that are kind of just like, oh yeah, even if it's not understood, this is going to be a silly little thing. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to don't fix what's not broken. Like, you wouldn't bring up the lunch thing or the soup thing, because like that's not an issue.
It's not an issue. Yeah.
So it's about catching the issues then before they happen, which is difficult to know. It's difficult to know.
Yeah, because you don't know if it's an issue until it's
right.
You know.
So
yeah.
I'm interested. Like, I think we should keep thinking about this and see what it actually looks like practically speaking.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to also theorize of like, well, it'll just work like this. But then, in theory and practice are the same. In practice, they aren't. It's like the practice is the part that I'm interested in now, of just like, okay, how do we actually make forward movement on that?
Yeah, we have to keep thinking about it.
Or practicing.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Practice it.
Yeah.
But
no more thinking about it.
Well, I'm just saying, thinking about when is a good time to use it, you know, or
Maybe
just
look for the
look
opportunity
for the
or
opportunities
something.
and then use it. Yeah, I like it. Wow, that was a big one. Cool.
Awesome. Excited for tomorrow.
Sweet.